welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some benefits and maybe some ideas of how to teach neurodivergent kids in homeschool, or even if your kids are in public school. I feel like these tips can still apply, they can still be helpful. And so if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to start this video by giving you a little bit of background about our family, our little bit of experience with a neurodivergent child. And then I'm going to tell some benefits maybe of homeschooling a neurodivergent child, and then also some, I don't know if I'd call them tips, or just some things that we have noticed that are helpful in trying to teach him and trying to help him go through school. So first off, if you are new around here or haven't seen some of the videos I've talked about on my kids, I have 6 kids. And our oldest is high functioning autistic, or however you want to put the label on it. The labels are different. And so he is verbal. He can do a lot of things, but there's also some different struggles. So first off, I'm going to be glancing at my notes because I don't want to forget anything. So I wanted to say that I don't have all the answers. I know it's hard, whether your child is homeschooled or goes to public school, to have children just in general are hard, but then to have one that is a little bit different and their brains or maybe their physical bodies don't function the way that everybody else's does is really difficult, and it can be a trial trying to figure it all out. I definitely don't have all the answers. These are just things that I have learned from our experience. And he wasn't, so our oldest is 13 now, and he wasn't necessarily treated differently when he was little, because we didn't know until he was older, until he was about 7, I think, was he diagnosed with autism. So there was some things when he was a little bit younger that maybe looking back would be like, oh, okay, maybe something's going on. And there were points where we were wondering if there was something the matter. He'd struggled a little bit in preschool that he was at, of listening to the teacher and different things like that, and would just be a little bit crazier than some of the other kids, but it's always hard. He's a boy, he was my oldest, you know, trying to discern what all those things meant. If they meant something more, like he never struggled with talking. You know, he didn't talk as much as his sister that's just 17 months younger than him, but he still talked, and he talked pretty clearly and stuff. So, and he knew math, he picked up reading really well, like all those things were fairly normal. Physically, everything was normal, right? He was walking fairly early, all those types of things and stuff. So none of those things were red flags. It was a little bit more behaviors, a little bit more OCD of like stacking things and having to have things a certain way. But as a little kid, most of those were kind of just like, he just likes to be alone or likes to do his own thing. And I am kind of that way too. So I just viewed it more like that. And I feel like that was a blessing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but it was sort of a blessing to not know until later. Obviously, if kids have bigger issues and things, like, yes, it's important to have them addressed at that time. But I feel like for us, it was a blessing to not know until he was a little bit older and to have like a label to put on him. And so when he was about 7, so we lived in California when he started kindergarten, and took him out after a month and decided to homeschool because it wasn't going well and they weren't being helpful. And they said if he was tested, they wouldn't change anything. Like, it was a whole thing. I think I have a whole video about it, but it was a whole thing. And so we moved to Utah not too long after that because we switched jobs. And then we were just already homeschooling. That was the plan, to keep homeschooling. So we eventually had him tested just through our pediatrician, and came back, yes, high functioning autistic. And so at that point, it was kind of a relief to finally have something, like, to know that we weren't going crazy, right? We had seen some things over those last few years that were a little bit concerning, and we're like, is this what it is? We don't really know. And it's hard to know how children are supposed to function normally when this is our oldest. He's the oldest grandchild on both sides of the family, right? There's just no comparisons. It was really difficult. And my husband and I are both the oldest. You know, it was just a tricky situation. So at that point, it became a relief to know that there was something else going on and that we could work towards addressing it. And so that's what we have done over the last, it's been a long time. It's almost been 7 years, which is kind of crazy. I'm like, really? It's been that long? So anyway, I think that's all like background wise that I'm gonna mention, just because I don't want this video to be about the background of it. But that's basically us and him in a nutshell. His name is Mazer. So if I mention him by name, that's who I'm talking about. And so now I'm gonna talk about some of the benefits I think, or we've seen from homeschooling. And then I'll go into a few things that have been helpful for him as we've tried to help him through school. So one of the benefits I believe that I've noticed, or that has helped me as a mom, is I've realized that every child has nuances. Whether they are neurodivergent or not, they all have things that they struggle with, that they're good at, that they need accommodations for. Every single child, no matter who they are, has different things. They need to be approached slightly differently. There's general rules that can be followed for most children, but there's certain things that might have to be more specific to that child. And so that has helped me recognize that Mazer had a deeper personality than I first thought. There's a book about autism. I was gonna grab it and I forgot. I'll link it down below. I can't remember at the moment, or I'll pop it up here on the screen, maybe too. I'll link it and pop it up here. I can't remember what it's called, but it changed my views. It's about autism, and it teached my views, like it just changed them and helped me better understand what was going on. And so I was very grateful for that book, but it helped me realize, like, to look deeper for the deeper personality instead of just what's on the surface, because it's easy to just see the autism and to say, oh, that's what this is, and forget that there's still a person under there that has a different personality than the rest of my kids. And Mazer naturally wants to be obedient. And like, I can see it in him. I can see it in the things that he does. And whereas my two other boys, they like to push buttons, okay? They like to be a little bit crazy and cause a fight and things like that. They like to push things as far as they can go, right? Push them to the limits. Mazer's not like that, but it may seem like he's like that because of this neurological disorder. I don't know, would you call it a disorder? And so when you look at it like that and are willing to look deeper and see, I feel like that's true for all children. If you can look deeper past some of the behaviors they have, then you can see what's really going on under the surface. And that's been a blessing from homeschooling. Like, one of the benefits of homeschooling is I have a chance to do that. I get to see him in different environments and different struggles he's having. I get to see how he's responding to different things. And so I can pinpoint those nuances, not always well, but we're getting better, maybe, and try to teach and cater to those things. And also it helps me love him more when it's really difficult, because I understand, like, this isn't really how you want to be responding, but you just don't know how to respond in a better way. Another benefit we have seen for homeschooling our autistic son is that if he had been in school, he probably would have been bullied. Okay, that's just generally what happens anyways to kids that are different and that can't function super well socially. I feel like he would have been bullied and wouldn't have been a very happy child. He probably wouldn't have been in a darker place right now, especially as he's like starting to go through puberty and everything. I feel like he would have really struggled. And we saw this even in just the first month of kindergarten, his struggles. Okay, the way that the teachers were trying to keep track of everything, and they would send him home with smiley faces or frowny faces, trying to accommodate and help him understand if he had a good day and help us understand if he had a good day. And it was just draining him of any sort of happiness because he didn't see what he was doing wrong. He didn't understand. And I feel like that would have been even more amplified as he got older. Just in that month, how much I saw him drained over years would have been detrimental. And so I feel like he is in a good place. He's a happy child. He still has struggles, right? We still have struggles with him. There's lots of fighting, there's yelling. Okay, there's lots of conflict that still happens, but he is generally overall happy. Okay, he views the world from a happier light than I think he would have otherwise. The last benefit that I wanted to mention is homeschooling him has helped us recognize needs right away and address them right away. This was, again, something with him being in kindergarten that first month. There was a disconnect between what was going on at school and what we were doing at home. There's a whole lot that was happening, and I'm not gonna go into it, but it was complicated. The teachers weren't telling us everything. You know, it's kind of hard, I think, sometimes from a teacher's point of view, like what do you tell? And a principal's point of view, and also kids are sometimes just crazy, you know, so trying to figure that balance out. But then also they wanted us to discipline him at home for something that happened at school, maybe in the morning, you know, so he's what, like 5 years old. He's not even gonna remember that. He's not gonna know what's happening, like why we're disciplining him at home for something that happened at school hours before. And so this disconnect was happening, and so issues weren't getting addressed. We didn't understand the full story because we weren't getting it. And so now that we're around him, we can see what's happening. We can try to stop conflicts before they happen. That's easier said than done, believe me. But we can also work on things when we see them instead of having to address them later and him not even knowing or remembering or seeing something wrong with it. So that's been a great benefit, is just recognizing the issue when it happens and then being able to try to work through it at that moment. Okay, so now I'm gonna share with you 5 suggestions that I think can be helpful in teaching a child that's neurodivergent. And so the first one is you might have to speed up or slow down curriculum, okay, when you're homeschooling them. You can apply these to public school, but I am thinking of them from a homeschool setting. And so you might have to either, if they are moving along and grooving and need to be bumped up, then bump them up. If they are struggling in something, then you may need to slow down, okay? And don't view it as a problem, view it as just a skill deficit, right? It's just something they don't know how to do yet. This applies to all children, okay? There's lots of things that they just don't know how to do yet. So how can you help them figure it out? So a few examples would be my daughter, who is 11, she's 11 and a half. Sometimes she needs to set a timer for her work for like 10 minutes, and then she'll set it for 5 minutes and take a break. And then that helps her work more efficiently. And so my husband taught her this skill. And recently, when she feels like she's struggling and not getting through her work as quickly as she would like to, she will grab the timer and do it, or I'll ask her, like, do you need the timer? But the time that it really meant a lot to me is when she grabbed the timer herself, right? She started to recognize that was an efficient tool for her, and it helped her go through her schoolwork a little bit faster and more efficiently. And so the same with my son Mazer, who, my oldest, he would kind of skip over a lot of his work. He wouldn't give it his best effort. He wouldn't tell us, and then it was like a struggle to get him to go do it. But something switched because we decided to do some grading. Nothing super strict, but he's in 7th grade. And so in a couple years, grades are gonna matter a little bit more and stuff for a transcript. And so I wanted to focus on, like, make sure you're doing things well. I don't want 100%, I don't want you like overly focused on a grade, but I want you to do things well. And so we started assigning grades to things, and some of my kids don't really care too much about that. But for him, it made all the difference. Having a percentage associated with what he did, and then being able to go back and correct them and get half points back and get a higher percentage, like, he just all of a sudden started doing all of his work. Like, it made a huge difference. And we had tried for several years to figure out how to do something, and that, like, all of a sudden worked. And I'm not saying that's gonna work for everyone, but you have to notice these different skill sets that maybe they haven't developed yet, or things that maybe will be helpful for them. And you might teach one child one skill and another child it doesn't work for. But you have to adapt the curriculum to their needs. Again, I understand this is hard. I have 6 kids. It's a lot trying to adjust and adapt to every single child's needs. But the benefits far outweigh the negatives that come in the moment, because then they start to function so much better, and so do you. And so take some time, think about it, talk with your spouse or maybe friends or family, whatever your support system looks like, and figure out some solutions to help address some of those pain points that you're experiencing with your kids. My second suggestion is to challenge them. And sometimes people are like, what do you mean? Like, they can't do things. Exactly, that's the problem. I think sometimes that was a big blessing of him being diagnosed later, was that I treated him like a normal child. And yes, I understand at some points you can't treat them like normal children, right? I get that. But it was helpful that I think sometimes when we get certain types of diagnoses with anything, whether it's physical, mental, whatever, emotional, we tend to baby those people and say, oh, that's okay, you can't do this because of your whatever you have, and we do that all the time. And sometimes we don't even think about it, right? We're just like, oh yeah, that's fine, like I understand. Instead, we need to be figuring out a solution of how they can do it. And I think that's really important. So, sorry, I'm looking at my notes so I don't forget anything. So instead of sitting there and saying, okay, yeah, fine, you can't do this, let's address the situation and be like, okay, I know that you're struggling with this now, or maybe you don't know how to do it now, but let's figure out a way we can make it work for you. So a few examples, I'll give a couple examples. So one of them, they both are church examples because those are the best ones that I had to kind of illustrate this point. So in our church, they have people give talks on Sundays about scripture, about Christ, things like that. And so they get up, give a little talk, and they'll have youth speakers. So younger kids, like teenagers usually around that age, will give a talk, and it's shortened compared to the adult ones. And so it's usually 5 minutes or less. It's not crazy, but it's a chance to get up and speak in front of a lot of people. It can be uncomfortable, for a lot of people, but it also helps them learn from a very young age how to do that kind of thing, how to prepare a topic and to address people, like talk to them. And so Mazer was asked to give a talk when this was a couple years ago, so he just turned 11, and he was nervous, but he's like, okay, because we had worked through a lot of things the same way with him. And so at this point he knows, like, we want you to do this, it'll be good for you, even though he's nervous, and we're gonna help you be as successful as possible. And so my husband helped him write out a talk, and then they went to the church building, and he stood up and he practiced it because my husband was going to be out of town the couple days leading up to Sunday. And so he practiced it. We practiced it at home. My husband put in some little things like pause right here, speak clearly, like all these like little prompts and everything in the talk. And then he got up on that Sunday, and we didn't know if my husband was going to have to walk up there and like stand by him and be support that way, or if he would stand by him and read some of the talk and my son would just stand there, and that would be how he would be successful. But we didn't even have to do any of those things. Like, we were willing to do what it took to make it a successful experience for him. He just got up there and he just said the talk, and he spoke so clearly, more clearly than he ever had at that point, and just said it because he'll just start to mumble a lot of the time, and he just spoke so clearly, and it was amazing. It was amazing. So when we challenge them to do things like this, we give them things to do that aren't outrageous, okay, and not outside of what's possible, but we provide them with ways to accomplish it. And some of it might be super simplified, and some of them it might be even more that like, okay, what can you do? Just stand here and I'll read the talk for you, right? It might have to be that simplified. The other quick example is the same type of thing with when boys are turning 12, the year they're turning 12, in church they pass the sacrament, which is like the bread and the water, around to the congregation. And he was very nervous about doing it because you sit in a certain spot and are assigned, like that dictates where you pass among the congregation. And there's several boys doing it at the same time, but right, they have certain rows they're supposed to do. And so he was nervous about where he was supposed to be. And so at the last minute, he's like, I don't want to do this. He was like freaking out about it. And my husband was already prepared. He's like, I'll come do it with you. Like, it'll be fine. I'll be on the other side. You can just pass it to me. It'll be fine. And so it was like, it ended up working out so well. And he stayed with that same route. You can change. You don't have to stay in the same one. But he stayed in that same one for the whole 2 years that he was passing because he knew that one well, which was fine. He didn't have to change, but he knew that one. He knew what he was supposed to do. But providing them with opportunities that challenge them helps them to grow. And you will have to determine what that is for your child and where they are, because it's gonna look different for everyone. But don't be afraid to give them a challenge, because that's how they grow. That's how we all grow. But I think sometimes when we hit a diagnosis, we forget about that. We're like, oh no, they can't do anything. And we start to baby them. But really, they can do amazing things. We just have to encourage them and provide ways for them to do so. My third suggestion is you might have to hire a helper. We have never personally done this. I have thought about it several times. It's just the timing and the structure of it was gonna be complicated. And we'd only need someone for a short amount of time, like to sit with him and make sure he's doing his schoolwork or something. So over the years, since my husband's job is really flexible, he has become my homeschool helper, and he does a lot of the individual subjects with my kids in the morning. I do more of the group work and then help with any of the grading and fixing things for the most part. And that's what's worked for us. He has become my homeschool helper. And I feel bad sometimes that he doesn't get more work done, but I'm grateful that he has a job that allows him to be so flexible. But you might have to have someone that comes in and helps a little bit or gives you a break, again, depending on the child, depending on what you need, or if they need a little bit more help with reading or something like that, and you have to also focus on your other kids and don't have a spouse that can be around as much because they have a real job. I'm just, that's what he always says. He's like, I just don't have a real job, but he does have a real job. It's just a very flexible, real job. And so if you have different situations, you might have to find maybe a family member. You know, it could be someone in your family or a good friend, something like that, that you could work out a situation. They could be your helper. And so find something that could work and that gives you maybe a little bit of a break and also a different perspective. You know, they provide a different way of teaching that you might not have thought of. My fourth suggestion is autism is his life. Okay, the point is that you have to see it as a whole picture. Whatever they're struggling with, whatever your child is struggling with, or a sibling, a friend, whatever it is, you have to see it as a whole picture. It is part of everything that's going on in their life, and it defines who they are. And this was again the disconnect with him in kindergarten and with being in school and us not knowing everything. We couldn't see the whole picture, and neither could the people at school. The communication wasn't going well, you know, and they weren't willing to work with us as much as we were trying to work with them. And so we weren't able to address the issues as a whole. It was just like little snippets. And so it made it really confusing for everyone and really hard on Mazer. And so we need to see these issues as it is part of their life, which again, the book that I'll link down below that I can't remember right now, helped me see that, help me understand that better, that it is a whole thing. And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means we need to have a little bit of a paradigm shift in the way that we're looking at life. And sometimes that's really hard. It can be really hard for you as a person. It can be hard for extended family. We've seen that. Sometimes it's really hard for them to see a child as like, why can't they do this? They should be able to do this. Like, this child can do this. Like, it's just difficult. Okay, so we need to view it as a whole picture. And my fifth suggestion is to establish routines. This is true for every single person. Okay, if you don't like to establish routines, you have already established a routine. Okay, you have established the routine of not establishing routines. Okay, if you are not intentionally showing up and saying, okay, this is how we're gonna do things, this is how we're gonna run, it doesn't have to be like 9 to 10 is like this and 10 to 11 is like this. But having some sort of order to the day is so very helpful. And if you don't establish that order, your kids will establish an order and you might not like it. Okay, so if they're doing things you don't like, it's probably because you've helped them establish that routine unknowingly. That's just how it goes. Babies are the same way with sleep training, all these things. Usually by the time you decide to sleep train them, you have already trained them to sleep in a certain way. And so you need to start from the beginning or retrain them now to do better things. So my oldest son, he just established, we have routines, you know, order of how we do our day. And he has gotten his own groove of how that looks for him. You know, he likes to come down right away, get breakfast, do his chores, and get right on his schoolwork. He is usually done with his schoolwork before any of my other kids, almost 100% of the time. And he does it well most of the time. And so he has found a routine that works for him, and we can do that for all of our kids. And I think a lot of especially neurodivergent children really thrive when they know what to expect, right? Having some sort of structure and routine to how things go is really good for them, and it lessens tantrums. The hard part is if there's a change to that routine, you know, things might explode a little bit. And so making sure you're letting them know, like tomorrow might look a little different than today. This is why, this is what's gonna be happening, and just giving them a heads up might be helpful. But having some sort of order to their day is very, very helpful. All right, so that's all my thoughts, probably, on teaching neurodivergent kids. This was a video constructed from me and my husband. I asked him what his thoughts were, and so I kind of put it all together as one thing. And so if you have other questions, put them down in the comments, and I will try to address those in a future video, or just answer them in the comments myself. And if you enjoy this type of content, remember to give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.